Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. I wanted to talk about something that has been, heavily prevalent in the division for years. I mean, the reason you see Division 1 footage here on this video is because I wanted to see if we can draw back from the early days of what makes, the current Division 2 game right now, because I know many may say the Division 1 and the Division 2 are different games and all that stuff, and I laugh and I'm like, yeah, right. Until you look at the Gear 2.0 and see how similar it is to patch 1.8.2 of the Division 1. And then you'll find, maybe people will finally get it. And I've told them many times that these games are so similar. I have seen similar bugs on both games, and many of you have, and you wonder, like, did you never wonder, did you never cross your mind, why have we seen, bugs that are similar from the first game in the second game if they're so different? They have very similar framework. Yes, there are differences, yes, but largely those differences, it's like the same company building the same structure in two different locations. They'll use similar philosophies, but they'll also adapt and adjust, to what will work in both places in a sense. But largely they'll keep their central ideology similar. But to my conversation, I keep wondering what day and in what age that the division or PvP and PvE will ever be balanced, because there have been so many patches in this game. As I speak to you right now, the Division 1 has an update 1.8 patch. Currently it is in its 8th major update in terms of a video game. Now, yes, software development requires constant patching and constant tweaking and all that. But in some cases, there have been good patches that have actually gone through the Division 1 to arrive where we are today. Now, from a PvE player's perspective, we've just always adapted. Many people, laugh at the PvE game for the Division, and I'm like, if you laugh at a PvE player in the Division who's played enough Division, the joke is on you. The amount of patches that this game went through, the amount of changes, the amount of philosophies that this game went through, the Division 2, is still kind of a baby in a sense. And the horrendousness of some of the gameplay here from Division 1 that eventually changed and became better, is quite funny and quite telling. So we've gone through a lot of these patches. We've gone through a lot of these changes. But the question is, when is the final lesson gonna ever be learned on how to finally do this balance thing? Anyways, because like I said, it seems like they're bringing everything back to this Division 1 style, where you don't have all these requirements of how many reds and how many blues and whatever. You just look at your major, they call it core attributes in the Division 2, but it's called major attributes here. Then they call them minor attributes, but they call them attributes in the so-called future Gear 2.0 that's coming soon. So to say much of a difference is here, I don't think many have necessarily evaluated what they're saying. This system worked. Okay? The system definitely worked. And so I think my biggest concern is, how is it possible? How is it possible that we still haven't gotten to a balance? Is it that, they can't reach a place where we balance the game? Or do they just continue to use balance to keep the game relevant and keep players playing? And I think the latter is actually the case. I think using balance to keep players playing is definitely one of the things that, they see the opportunity to do, and they use it to keep players playing for a few months. And then again, before you know, oops, we didn't balance things very well. So why don't we just come back here and, try to rebalance everything and overhaul everything centrally? If they didn't do this, I think maybe the fear is, a game like this might get super stale and players won't play it. I've even seen some people complain about similar things happen in Destiny, where they make nerfs across the board. When in reality, the obvious solution, in my opinion, is if you separate Division PvP and PvE, you will achieve a higher level of balance than you already have. Now, you can't have the full balance, but if you separate them, you're going to achieve the balance. Now, a lot of people said, say, but that's going to, nullify the PVE game as to why players need to, grind items and all that. Well, the separation, I think what we've not really talked about is how this separation needs to be. I think when we say separate PvP from PvE, I think people feel like it's a 100% separation. I don't think that's the case. I think the separation should be kind of, something that works with like a semi-permeable membrane where things from both sides can flow back and forth, but in a very limited and a limited controlled, aspect. And they've actually done something like that in the Division, in a Division game. Many of you may say, but, Division is not like that. Is it? Or is it not? Right now I'm running Predator's Mark. And most of you know that this Predator's Mark was actually removed from the meta in the Division 1. Like the classified Predator's Mark. It was actually weakened for PvP play, because a lot of players were crying about it. They were literally in tears. They got on their knees. Somebody gave them a box of Kleenexes and they shed tears saying it was too strong and all this stuff, when other players were like, it's not too strong. You just have to know how to play against it. Now, I'm just being facetious, folks. I mean, when I say people were crying about it, I'm playing. Okay, I'm not trying to insult anybody, because people might go ahead and say, oh, it's not about that. Relax. We're talking here. And then also you look at some other brand sets that also went through multiple changes in this game. And Sentry's Call is one of those. It was also kind of removed from the PvP meta, if you understand what I mean. So in this case, the game was in its end of life. They actually made this while they were in the middle of like trying to release the Division 2. I remember, there was a stream with Emperor, and there was also what's his name, Terry came on that stream, and they were talking about how these were, issues that needed to be addressed. Like everybody was in a frenzy. Everybody, people threw a fit. Here's my classified Sentry's Call. Let me read its bonuses to you so that you can see what I mean. Headshots, when you get to the 4-piece, headshots using a semi-automatic weapon marks the enemy, increasing the damage inflicted on the target for a duration of 5%, blah, 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 blah. 6-piece Sentry's Call says, NPC targets can now receive up to 6 marks. After 1 mark, every headshot on the target has a 50% chance to spread a single mark to additional targets within 25 meters. At 6 marks, your headshot damage on the target is increased by 100%. This cannot be allowed to go into a PvP scenario. And actually, if you guys have played this game long enough, early patches, they released Sentry's Call in pretty much this kind of state, the 4-piece or so, where you could mark an enemy and they could receive like 15% damage with that mark. It was broken. It was a broken gear set for PvP. Oh my gosh. But boy, did players abuse the heck out of that thing. Somebody would tap you with a pistol and then light you up. In fact, before they actually made it with a semi-automatic weapon, it was just a headshot. That's how it was. It was so strong. Even in PvE, it was actually very powerful. But over time, the only reasonable solution was to take it out of the PvE meta, the PvP meta. Does that make sense? Now, when I say separate PvP from PvE, a lot of people jump on me like, oh, it's not gonna work, when in reality it's been executed with poise and elegance. It just got done. Sure, some people were burned because they'd already gone ahead to farm these items and spec it for PvP play, but at the same time, if it became a problem, they just tactfully moved it away from the meta and allowed for other things to be able to go in. Now, this was very complicated because of the way classified, gear sets are, and I'm glad I logged back into this. Let me show you the Predator's Mark 1 too. The Predator's Mark says, hitting 10 shots without switching targets now applies the Predator's Mark, which makes the target bleed for 50% of damage already done by those bullets. The damage over time to the target is increased by 15% for every 3,000 stamina and can critically hit. When a 9,000 stamina, the damage is blah, 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 blah. The Predator's Mark ignores the status effect immunity of NPCs. So they were able to just take stylishly also spec Predator's Mark in a way that it just worked more effectively for NPCs. So 2 examples from patch 1.8, which is pretty much the last patch before going into the Division 2. Now, yes, I get it. Division 2 was in development before the Division 1's patch 1.8, yada, 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 yada. But we still are getting updates, and it's still pretty much largely the same team that did this stuff, that did the Division 2. I mean, it was Thailander who was already balancing stuff in Division 1 that was talking about the brand sets in E3. So it's largely the same folks in a sense. You know, not everybody, but we still see some of the faces we've known from the Division 1. So in my estimation, I think this is the obvious solution. And, you know, the developers, though, you know, I feel like the developers, the designers, the decision makers will gladly ignore this solution as a possibility, because, you know, it doesn't, if they did this and they did it very well, it'll eventually remove all the division in the game. You know, nobody will be bickering back and forth, and the opportunity to just take things that are viable, things that had no problems, and nerf them will be gone as well. So they need to have that as something of a sort to continue to keep the game relevant, trending. In a weird way, in my mind, I think it's kind of an interesting and a fun thing sometimes. Sometimes it's frustrating. I've gone through so many patches. Some of them have frustrated me. Some of them have actually made me happy, because I was like, yeah, this feels like playing a mini game within a game, because it feels like everything is new again, if you understand what I mean. So I guess we can continue to have them, but at the same time, there needs to continue to be that tactful, you know, change where things are done, you know, in incremental shifts rather than drastic moves. I think it's the drastic moves that gets a lot of people. A lot of people can't understand why they have to lose everything that they've worked for in such a huge shift. They don't understand, like, why do I have to change all my gear? Why does my Eagle Bearer have to feel slightly less powerful? Why does my P416, you know, these questions players continue to ask, and they're valid questions. And so largely, for you to be able to avoid players getting frustrated and leaving for those reasons, because that's the reason many players left. By the way, many of you may not know, but that's one of the reasons a lot of players left. A lot of players were done. They were done with these kinds of shifts, and they moved games, and they went to Destiny. And Destiny even also gets stuff like that, from my understanding of how the game goes, once in a while. So, and I think the reason Destiny doesn't get it as frequently is because largely PvP and PvE have some level of separation, some level. I'm not saying it's 100%, but it still makes the game viable, and that's all the Division, you know, I think the Division needs to do in order to make the game less frustrating for a number of players. So that's pretty much my, you know, my reasoning. You know, if you have any objections, share them in the comment section. Let's have this conversation. I think it's time that this conversation, you know, makes its way to, you know, to the development level or to the design level, and something that, you know, they can start thinking about in terms of the future of this game. Because trust me, you're not going to have enough people to sit there and play multiple patches and multiple drastic changes in the future if you continue with this philosophy. It's just too much, and it's really damaging for player confidence, because what you tell the player, you know, is, oh, we didn't do our job properly the first time. All right, that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for your time and audience. I'll see you guys in our next video. Feel free to check out the links in the description to support the channel. And I guess that's it for me. Peace.